The silence before Olympus, long before thunder roared across the heavens, before Mount Olympus crowned the sky and Zeus ruled from his throne of lightning, there was silence. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of things unspoken, the silence of gods buried beneath myth and time. In the beginning, the cosmos was not governed by order. It was shaped by forces too vast, too unknowable, to be worshipped in temples or sculpted in marble. Before the Olympians rose to power, the world trembled beneath the reign of older beings, ancient and immense, whose names are now barely whispered. The Greeks called them protogenoi, the primordial gods. They were not born. They were. Nyx, the night, cloaked the world in darkness before light was even a thought. Ananke, the curve of destiny, wrapped the cosmos in necessity before time began to tick. And Zagreus, the twice-born, stood at the edge between life and death, holding a truth too wild for Olympian order. These gods were not loved. They were feared. There were no grand temples for Ananke, no marble statues for Nyx, no joyous festivals for Zagreus. Their myths did not sing of triumph and glory, but of fate, silence, and chaos. They ruled not the heavens or the seas, but deeper realms, hidden realms, realms where time loops, where death breathes, where prophecy is a curse. The age before Olympus was not golden, it was veiled. Zeus did not simply rise to power, he conquered it. The Titanomachy, the war of the gods, was not just a battle against Chronos and the Titans. It was a purging, a rewriting. In the smoke of war, old gods were torn down, their stories scattered like ash on the wind. And then, silence. The myths that survived tell of triumph, of justice, of the Olympians bringing light to a dark world, but the ruins speak differently. The Orphic hymns, whispered in mystery cults, tell of gods with shattered names and broken faces. They tell of Zagreus, whose blood runs in Dionysus, of Nyx, whose darkness even Zeus would not cross, of Ananke, whose coils bind even the gods. They were not forgotten. They were buried. This is their story, not as the Olympians told it, but as the world remembers in its bones, in the shadows of temples long abandoned, in the words that echo in dreams, in the myths that were erased, because they were too powerful to survive. This is the story of the gods the Greeks feared to remember, the ones who came before Olympus, the ones who never truly left. Chapter 1. Zagreus, the child of death and wine. Before Dionysus danced in drunken revelry, before grapevines wound through Greece and madness was called divine, there was Zagreus. He was a god not born in joy, but in the shadows. A secret child, hidden even from Olympus. Some say he was the son of Persephone, queen of the underworld, and Zeus himself, who came to her not as a man, but as a serpent. Others whisper darker origins, that Hades was his father, that Zagreus was born of the underworld itself, death and divinity wrapped in one. But all agree on one truth: Zagreus was powerful. Too powerful. He was born not as a baby, but as a godchild, radiant and terrible. Even in his infancy, the Titans, ancient beings of chaos, remnants of a defeated age, saw him and trembled. For in his small hands, Zagreus held thunder, fire, light. Zeus, proud and arrogant, declared Zagreus his heir. Not Apollo, not Ares, not Athena. A child of death and darkness would inherit the sky. The Olympians did not rejoice, and the Titans plotted. They waited until Zagreus wandered alone, a divine toddler playing among the stars. They came with painted faces and lulling songs, hiding blades beneath soft voices. They tricked him with toys, a spinning top, a mirror, a golden apple, symbols of ego and distraction, and then they tore him apart. Limb by limb, the Titans dismembered Zagreus, scattering his divine flesh across the world. His blood fell upon the earth, and from it rose humanity, born not from love, but from violence and divinity. From that moment, humans would forever carry the twin seeds of God and monster within them. But Zagreus did not die. Gods do not die. Athena, weeping for the child, gathered what she could, his heart still beating. She brought it to Zeus. The king of gods swallowed the heart whole, and from it Dionysus was reborn, a second birth. A second name, Dionysus, the god of wine, madness, ecstasy, and transformation, the joyful mask that hid a shattered face. Most would know him only as the laughing god, crowned in ivy and desire. But beneath the revelry lived the ghost of Zagreus, the dismembered child, the torn god, the first to rise from death. The Orphic mysteries, a secret cult of initiates, remembered him. They sang his name in whispers, offered sacrifice in caves, lit by flickering torches. To them, Dionysus was a mask, and Zagreus the truth beneath it. But the Olympians had no love for the truth. Over time, Zagreus vanished from public temples and mainstream myths. The name was absorbed, rebranded, forgotten. Dionysus took the stage, laughing and beloved, while Zagreus wept in the shadows of forgotten hymns. Yet in art, echoes remain, strange depictions of Dionysus as a child with horns or being torn apart by beasts. In ruins, fragments of stone carry his name in worn letters, and in the blood of myth, his tragedy still beats. Zagreus was the first god to die and return, the first to carry the wound of rebirth. The first proof that even gods could be broken and become something new, and so the Greeks erased him, because Zagreus was not a god of comfort. He was a god of mirrors, of duality, of what lies beneath. He was the scream under the laughter, the death beneath the dance, the ancient unblinking eye that watches through the mask. And when we drink, when we celebrate, when we lose ourselves in ecstasy and madness, it is not Dionysus who watches, it is Zagreus, smiling with broken teeth. Chapter 2. Nyx. She, who birthed the darkness, before the world had form, before stars stitched light across the void, before even chaos whispered the first name into the abyss, there was Nyx, not born, not made, simply there. Nyx was the night, the primal shadow, not the absence of light but the presence of something older, deeper, a velvet blackness so vast it choked time itself. She did not walk among mortals. She did not stand beside Olympus. She did not belong to any world. Nyx was the world, when the world was nothing at all. To the Greeks, she was too terrifying to worship openly. There are no great temples carved in her name, no festive hymns, only the breathless silence of those who feared to say too much. Even the greatest of gods, even Zeus, king of sky and thunder, stepped lightly in her presence, for he knew her power. In a fragment from Hesiod's Theogony, it is said that Nyx lived far away, in a palace shrouded in mist at the edge of the world. She rose each night from the underworld, covering the heavens in her cloak. Her daughter Hemera, the day, fled before her. They would never meet, for where Nyx was, light could not be. But her darkness was not empty. It gave birth. From Nyx came the most feared and mysterious forces in the cosmos. She bore them alone without a father, as if her will alone could shape reality. Her children were Hypnos, the god of sleep, who drifted on black wings and made kings and warriors fall helpless. Thanatos, god of death, who came softly and without mercy. Eris, the goddess of strife, whose whispers turned brother against brother. Moros, the spirit of doom. Apate, the deceiver, goddess of lies. And most terrifying of all, the Moirai, the Fates, Clotho who spun the thread of life, Lachesis who measured it, and Atropos who cut it. They did not answer to Zeus, they answered only to her. Nyx was no enemy, she did not conquer, she did not seduce, she simply was. And in her shadow, truth became visible. For only in darkness do the stars reveal themselves. Only in night do dreams take shape. The Orphics and other mystery cults honored her quietly. They saw her not as evil, but as necessary, the divine balance to chaos and light. Her rituals were held in caves at midnight, far from the eyes of priests and kings. There, worshippers would chant her hymns in ancient tongues, hoping for visions or warnings. But Olympus had little room for such unknowable power. As Zeus and his siblings shaped their rule, they pushed Nyx to the margins of myth. She became a whisper in the dark, a name recited by poets, but feared by priests. Her daughter Night still crossed the sky, but the goddess herself was exiled from the stories that children heard. The myths focused on Athena's wisdom, Hera's jealousy, Apollo's light. But they did not speak of the one whom Zeus would never challenge, the one who birthed the very things the gods could not control: death, sleep, deception, doom. Even in modern retellings, Nyx is a shadow. an aesthetic, a name, but in ancient truth she was the mother of the unseen, and perhaps she remains. For when the stars blink out, when sleep comes suddenly, when truth bends into lies and fate moves with cold fingers, it is not the Olympians you feel, it is Nyx, older than hope, older than fear. Older, watching from the place where light forgets itself, and in her presence, even gods bow their heads. Chapter 3. Ananke. The fate the gods could not escape. Before even night stretched her veil across the cosmos, before sleep and death had names, there was Ananke, the force no god could defy. She was not a deity in the way mortals understood. She did not walk among men, did not rage like Ares or woo like Aphrodite. She was not love or light or war or wind. She was necessity. She was inevitability. She was fate made flesh. Ananke's name meant force, not force of strength, but of binding, of inevitability, of what must be. She did not ask for worship. She did not care for prayers. She was the law behind all laws. The ancients whispered that Ananke was born from the void, the great cosmic breath that exhaled the universe into motion. She emerged alongside her consort, Chronos, time. Together, they coiled around the cosmos in the form of serpents, their bodies entangling the universe in loops and spirals. They crushed primal matter into shape, forcing chaos to become cosmos. Their embrace spun the celestial spheres and carved the path of stars. In some Orphic hymns, it was Ananke, not Zeus, who birthed the fates, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, and whispered their roles into being. Even the gods were caught in her web. Zeus, mighty and proud, could hurl thunderbolts and hurl titans into Tartarus, but he could not escape Ananke's decree. In the shadow of Olympus, it was said that when oracles spoke, they spoke not the will of Apollo, but the echo of Ananke. When heroes met their doom despite valor, when kings fell despite wisdom, it was her hand cutting the thread. Yet she is nearly absent from the great myths. Why? Because Ananke could not be bargained with. She could not be seduced, threatened, or prayed away. She represented the truth no religion wants to admit, that even the gods are not free. So her myth was erased. Her temples fell into ruin, or were, never built. Her name was folded into allegory. Later philosophers like Plato and the Stoics would mention her as a cosmic principle, not a goddess, but a force. That was safer, that was palatable, but the old myths, the ones burned, the ones sung by trembling lips in cave sanctuaries and mountaintop winds, spoke of her as real. A towering figure wreathed in stars and silence, a spiral-eyed queen who turns the wheel of time, a mother of doom, not out of malice, but because the world must move as it must, and some say she is still there, that when events unfold that no god seems able to stop, when destinies are fulfilled in spite of divine will, it is her presence felt behind the veil. She is not cruel. She is not kind. She simply is. And to challenge her, 'tis to try to undo the turning of the stars. Even gods are bound. Even Olympus kneels. Even time bends to Ananke. Chapter 4. Erased, rewritten, replaced. The Olympians reign atop the myths of the world. Glorious, golden, untouchable. Zeus rules the sky, Poseidon the sea, Hades the underworld. Athena grants wisdom, Apollo brings the sun. Their stories are known across continents, immortalized in marble, echoed in modern tales. But what they didn't tell you is that these stories are not the first. They are the survivors of a mythic purge. To build Olympus, a history had to be rewritten. Power thrives not only through war, but through memory. And memory can be shaped, stories can be edited, names can be replaced. And that's exactly what happened. Consider this. Dionysus, god of wine and madness, was a latecomer to Olympus. But in truth, he is older than Olympus itself, because before Dionysus, there was Zagreus, the god torn to pieces and reborn. His story was violent, cyclical, unsettling, too raw for the polished image of the Olympians. And so, he was split. Dionysus became the joyful mask. Zagreus became a secret, whispered only by the Orphics in torchlit rituals deep underground. Or take Nyx, the night incarnate. Even Hesiod admitted that Zeus himself feared her. Yet where are her temples, her grand festivals? They don't exist, because worshipping something greater than Zeus was dangerous. And so, Nyx was pushed to the edges, preserved in fragments, hidden behind symbols, and Ananke, the fate even the gods couldn't escape. She was the great cosmic necessity, the one force more powerful than Olympus. But her myth was far too threatening. If even Zeus bends to Ananke, what power does he truly hold? And so she was made into a concept, a metaphor, not a goddess. Safer that way, but this was no accident. This was a campaign of erasure. The Olympians, like the rulers of empires, needed to control the story. The old gods were too wild, too cosmic, too mysterious. They did not fit into temples. They did not answer prayers. They reminded mortals and gods that power was not simple. So the old gods were cut out like diseased limbs. Where Zagreus once reigned, Dionysus stood. Where Nyx cloaked the world, Artemis walked the night. Where Ananke bound all things, the fates were demoted to mere servants. Even Hades, ruler of the underworld, became a shadow of what he once was. In the earliest myths, he was not evil. He was inevitable. But as time passed and myths softened, he became a villain in Christianized retellings. The fear of death was no longer sacred. It was something to cast onto a horned devil. Another rewriting. The priests, the poets, the kings, they all played their part. And yet, the cracks show. Fragments survive. Orphic tablets buried with the dead speak of gods who came before. Vases depict scenes scholars can't fully explain. Horned infants, shadowy women, spirals in the sky. The old symbols resurface in dreams, in rituals forgotten but never truly lost. The erased gods live on, not in temples, but in the spaces between. In the moments before sleep, where Nyx waits. In the patterns of stars, still spinning as Ananke once willed. In the madness behind laughter, where Zagreus hides. You were never meant to remember them. That was the plan. But stories are stubborn things. They whisper from ruins. They echo from shadows. They survive erasure because they were never truly written. They were felt. And now, you remember. Chapter 5. Whispers in stone and bone, the official stories, those bound in scrolls, carved into marble, told beside hearthfires, end where the Olympians begin. But history, true history, never begins with perfection. It begins with bones. Long before Plato and Pindar, before Homer sang of Troy, there were older gods and older worshippers. People who carved spirals into cave walls, who buried their dead with mystic tablets inscribed with names now lost. People who raised stone altars to forces they did not dare name aloud. These were not myths, these were rituals. Archaeologists have unearthed them. Hints, fragments. In Crete, a child god torn and reborn. In Thessaly, graves lined with gold-leaf texts describing a journey through the underworld not ruled by Hades, but by a goddess older still. In Arcadia, a story of a beast god whose blood sowed new life. Zagreus, perhaps in his rawest form. And always, alongside these remnants, symbols of the serpent, the labyrinth, and the cosmic wheel. Patterns the Olympians never claimed. Patterns belonging to gods, older, stranger, buried beneath the polished surface of Greek religion, in the bones of sacrificed animals, arranged in deliberate spirals, in the blackened stones of altars burned not once, but again and again across generations. In clay figures of winged, faceless women, not Aphrodite, not Athena, something else. The myths call these cults. Mystery religions, primitive, forgotten, but perhaps they were remembering something the Olympians tried to bury. The Orphics, a secretive sect, believed that the soul was divine, imprisoned in the body, yearning to return to a cosmic source. Their rites didn't honor Zeus or Apollo. They spoke of Nyx, of Chronos, of the titan Dionysus Zagreus, torn apart by the titans, reborn from ashes. They called life a prison. They called death a return. These weren't heresies. These were survivals. Even the Eleusinian mysteries, the greatest secret rite in all of Greece, centered not on Olympus, but on Persephone, the stolen goddess of the underworld, and Demeter, her grieving mother. Their initiates swore never to reveal what they saw. But those who emerged were changed. Some claimed to have seen death itself and come back understanding that it was not an end, but a return. And always, in these rites, darkness first, light second, a descent, then ascent, a death, then rebirth. The same pattern, the same story, the same gods, erased from temples, but alive in the blood and breath of ritual. They couldn't be destroyed, so they were buried. But buried things rise, and when they do, they speak not in words, but in echoes. In dreams you can't explain, in déjà vu that stings like memory, in symbols that draw your eye though you've never seen them, in a shiver when you see stars move in spiral. They speak from stone and bone, not loudly, not clearly, but persistently. The myths written by kings were meant to silence them, but silence too is a kind of voice, and it whispers, there were others before them, and they remember you, even if you forget them. They are waiting beneath the dust. Chapter Fixe, the Forbidden Revival. There are some stories the world is ready to forget, and some that will not stay buried. The old gods, Zagreus, Nyx, Ananke, they were not just erased, they were forbidden. Their names vanished from official hymns, their rites declared blasphemy, their worship outlawed not once, but again and again, by kings, by priests, and later by the hands of empire. But what is forbidden often becomes sacred. It began with dreams, strange dreams passed down through generations, dreams of a boy crowned with serpents, torn to pieces in a room of flame. Dreams of a winged woman standing at the edge of time. Dreams of black-robed figures chanting in caves, holding torches that do not flicker in the wind. Then came the whispers, in hushed corners of temples, in letters never signed, in fragments of lost texts and the margins of banned books. Mentions of rites not practiced in 2,000 years, the Dionysian mysteries of the Thracians, the black sacrifices to Nyx under a moonless sky. The wheel of Ananke carved in secret beneath the marble steps of the Parthenon. And then the rituals returned. Not in grand temples, not in public festivals, but in shadows. A woman in Sicily weaving black thread around a funerary jar, whispering a prayer older than Greek. A group of pilgrims climbing Mount Parnassus, not for Apollo's oracle. No, but to enter the oldest caves and drink from the forgotten spring of Mnemosyne memory. A manuscript found in a monastery, bound in human skin, containing a hymn to the goddess Ananke, untranslatable and unfinished. Academics call it folklore, occultists call it truth, but they agree on one thing: these gods, once erased, are re-emerging. And what's more terrifying, that people are remembering them, or that the gods are remembering us. For there are signs, unexplainable patterns, recurring symbols across distant cultures, spirals, serpents, divided eyes, pale masks that show up in cave paintings from Greece to Siberia, and the feeling, the unmistakable, unspeakable feeling, that something is waking up. Even now, some modern seekers reject the polished myths. They turn away from the thunder of Zeus, the beauty of Aphrodite, the sun songs of Apollo. They seek the deep gods, the ones that live in silence, in cold stone, in unyielding truth. They gather in basements, in forests, in ruins. They chant old names, they trace the lost symbols, and sometimes they disappear. Others say they are changed. Eyes darker, dreams deeper, speech slower, but voice carved with certainty, as if they've seen something no one else can. Maybe the revival was never forbidden by the gods, but by the world that feared what it meant, that the gods who ruled Olympus were not eternal, that behind their glory was a deeper, darker fire, that what came before might return, and when it does, the myths we know will burn away like fog at sunrise. Chapter 7. When the erased return, the gods who were erased do not return in grand, thunderous displays. They do not appear in shining chariots or descend from clouds. They do not ask for offerings or make their presences known with the sweeping grace of the Olympians. No, they return like forgotten echoes. Silent, unbidden, they return in the dark, in the places where the light of civilization never reached, in the whispers of the forgotten, in the fragments of rituals never finished. Perhaps they are already here. There are stories from the edge of the world, from the deep mountains of Greece, from the shadowed caves of Sicily, from the windswept ruins of Crete, of strange occurrences, inexplicable events that cannot be explained by modern reason. Ancient symbols, once thought lost, are reappearing in places where they should not be. They are not just relics. they are alive. In the cracks of time, these forgotten gods stir, and those who seek them out, those who tread into the shadows, find their lives changed. For when they return, the rules of the universe shift, time itself bends. Ananke, the goddess of fate, whispers in the dreams of those who walk too close to the ancient temples, her voice a thread woven into the fabric of their reality. People claim to wake up with sudden knowledge of things they should not know, of the past, of the future, of forces at work in the hidden corners of the world. The truth of how the gods abound and what lies beyond them. The feeling that everything is inevitable but still not yet written. Nyx, goddess of the night, stretches her dark fingers over the world once again. Those who sit in the darkness find themselves contemplating the nature of existence, the thin veil between life and death. They hear whispers from deep, dark places, and they wonder if perhaps the stars they've always gazed upon are not fixed, but alive, watching them as much as they watch the sky. They wake in cold sweats, knowing there is something lurking beneath the surface, something older than anything they've been taught. And Zagreus, the god of wild, untamed rebirth, steps from the shadows, not as a god of drunken revelry, but as a force. He is not a deity of celebration anymore, but of chaos. He brings with him a storm, a fever, a primal reminder that no life is free of the forces that bind it. From him comes madness, transformation, and an unsettling yearning for something greater than the mundane. He is not here to restore what was lost, but to remind the world that nothing, not even the gods, can remain static. The Olympians thought they were the final gods, the greatest to ever rule. They sought to erase the ancient ones, those who saw the universe as a web of forces, greater than gods themselves. But the Olympians had only one flaw. They believed that they could control everything. What the Olympians forgot or refused to accept is that the ancient gods cannot be erased, for they are woven into the very fabric of existence. They are not just figures of myth or fables of old. They are forces, untouchable by time, by kings, by empires. The gods who were erased have always been here. They've always waited, and now they are stirring. When they return, it will not be with the sound of trumpets or the rolling of thunder. It will be in the quiet moments, in the unseen, the unknown. When the world turns too far in one direction and the balance of old powers is threatened, the forgotten gods will rise again, and when they do, nothing will ever be the same.